Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm a veteran teacher with 24 years of experience, a mother of 3 adult daughters, and grandma to one-year-old boy, Grayson. On my channel, I'll be posting videos each week about instructional tips, teacher life, and work-family balance. Every week, you'll find stories that give you a glimpse into the real struggles many teachers face. You'll learn ways to deal with common teacher challenges and receive great resources you can adapt for any grade, whether it's preschool or high school. Be sure to click like and subscribe for new content, and comment below with your grade or subject area to introduce yourself. Hello everybody, I'm here today with your NGSS video as promised. Several of you have sent me messages asking for information because your district or state has recently gone to NGSS and you're feeling a little confused. And to be honest with you, our state, North Carolina, has not adopted NGSS yet, even though they were one of the leading states that participated in designing the performance expectations and the new standards that went along with them. So I am learning right along with you, and I hope that what I'm going to give you today will be a good starter for you. And we can always do some follow-up with questions that you might have after this video. But this should be a really good rundown for people who are just starting with NGSS and want to know, where do I begin? It's really like a huge ocean. There's so many layers of information, and it will take some time to process. So my disclaimer here today is, number one, I was not involved in any of the committees that design these standards. I'm just a learner. I'm a classroom teacher just like you are. But I've had requests for this information, so to help you out and to save you time as you're planning for the next year, I went ahead and compiled some resources for you. Number two, you need to make sure that you give yourself time. Anytime you're trying a new strategy as a classroom teacher, you have to give yourself grace. You're not going to be great at it. There are going to be some things that are wins for you, and there are going to be other things that you really struggle with. So allow yourself to fail forward and just keep on going. And each day you can reflect on how it went. Each lesson that you plan, you can reflect on how closely you got to the aims of the NGSS. And all right, so I've titled this presentation Navigating the NGSS Ocean because there is so much information to learn about it. And some of you asked for the NGSS for Dummies, so I threw that in there. So first I want to talk to you about the history of NGSS and why now? Why are we looking at this now? You may have realized from your own teaching experience that our curriculum has gone through some major overhauls in the last 10 years. With Race to the Top, there were many companies that were looking at what does the future workforce need. Technology is changing at such a rapid pace, and our students really have to be prepared for a completely different world than the one that we had to be prepared for when we were taking middle and high school classes. So to make sure that we have a good continuum across the elementary, middle, and high school grades leading into that future workforce, a group of businesses and nonprofit organizations sat down and agreed that exposure to science is going to be really important to the future workforce. So in 2009, there had been some studies. Forbes was one of the companies that did an independent study on all the skills that students would need to be successful in the future. And one of those, the results of those came out. There were 10 things that really stood at the top of all of the other things that businesses felt that students were going to need to be successful. They are creativity, emotional intelligence, or the ability to sense other people's emotions, to know how to respond appropriately, and also to be in control of their own emotions and situations. Number three, analytical and critical thinking. And that's basically because with the technology advances, students are thrown so much information on a regular basis that they have to be able to process multiple streams of information and synthesize that information. To do that, you have to be a critical thinker. Number four, active learning and growth mindset. If everything in the world is constantly changing, that we can't really prepare students for their future world, because by the time they get there, it's going to be different. So instead, they have to have a learner's mindset so that they can continue to grow and learn and challenge themselves when they're not around the teachers any longer. Number 5, judgment and decision making. So being able to process everything that's coming at them and make good judgments, good decisions. What's important, what's not important, what am I going to use, how am I going to put these things together? All of those skills are important to our 21st century learner. Interpersonal communication skills. We are working together more than ever before. Students need to know how to appropriately work with people that are different from them, people that have different skill sets, and be able to do group projects. They need to have technology skills that they would be doing that online now, and we've seen that with COVID-19, how important that really is to the future of our youth, even more than we thought it would be. Leadership skills. Leadership skills we often think of, that's just going to be important to people that want to be managers, but any person needs to have a certain amount of leadership skills in order to be able to compete in a global economy. They have to be able to sell themselves as someone who is a leader in their particular area of expertise, even if, you know, that's a trade or a skill. They do need to be able to lead and show that they have those potential skills, even if they might not be considered for a management role. Also, they need to have diversity and cultural intelligence, and never have we been more aware of that than just in the last few weeks with everything that's been going on in our world. It's very important that students are culturally sensitive and that they get along with diverse groups of people. And I already mentioned the technology skills, which goes back to being a lifelong learner, because the technology that we're using now, we know it's going to be different by the time students graduate high school. So we need to make sure that they're prepared to keep learning as new technology arises. And lastly, embracing change, because our world is changing quickly. So those are the 10 skills that were determined to be important. Race to the Top really focused on reforming things to make sure that our students were prepared for a changing world, and not just, you know, certain groups of students, but all students would be successful. All right, so that was 2009. In 2010 to 2011, an NGS work group was composed, and they used Race to the Top funding for that. This was many different groups of people, public and private people. I'll read some of the Hunt Institute, the Burroughs Welcome Fund, the NC Community Collaborative, National Science Teachers Association, the NC Science Leadership Association, the North Carolina Association for Biomedical Research, the NC Mathematics and Science Education Network, and Teachers in Science Collaborating. Those are just a few of them. And there were many states that led. The first states to actually adopt the NGSS were Rhode Island and California. But there were several other states, North Carolina included, that were leading states in developing the NGSS. So in April of 2013, they revised the final initial release of these standards, and that was available for states to adopt in 2014. So the longest that any states have been using this over 5 years now, 6 years. So this is really a very new thing. And I want to encourage you that because it's a new thing, it's still developing. And as more states come along, we're going to see changes in the way that it's used. So you might have a question about whether or not your state has adopted it. You may not. This is a map that shows you as of May of 2019, and I was not able to find a more current map than this. Maybe that will be released later on this year. But the dark blue states have already adopted NGSS. The tan states have adopted standards that are based on the framework. I'm not really sure why North Carolina is not included in that, because I know that when we revised our North Carolina Essential Standards for Science, that we based all of that on the same framework that the NGSS is based on. And I think the thought process behind that is that change takes time. And because you're going to see later in this video that it's really a shift in the way that you think about science instruction, that the leaders of North Carolina education, they knew that it was going to take some time and phases in order for teachers to be ready to process all of this. So instead of switching directly over to NGSS, we kind of took our standards in a direction where teachers would already understand some of the basic concepts by the time we were ready to adopt NGSS. From what I understand, our current timeline is that North Carolina is looking to move towards the NGSS adoption by 2026. And it's right now the summer of 2020. So that's kind of the timetable that I understand, but that's the most current information that I was able to find on that topic. All right, so let's talk about the NGSS and why it's important. We already discussed the fact that we're actually preparing students to live in a world that we really don't know much about yet. There are new careers that are being invented constantly. The reality is that students today may have multiple careers over their lifetime, and things are just changing so quickly. Because of this, it's important that we don't just teach facts and science. It's not just about the facts, it's about a process. So what we want to do, our main objective with teaching through the NGSS, is to teach students a way of thinking about the world. And we're not measuring how many facts they know, but we're measuring can they perform using the content? What are they able to do using the material that they know about the scientific world? So to be competitive globally, everyone has to have a firm science foundation, not just students that are going into science and math careers or engineers, but all students need to have a basic science literacy. As part of this reform, a lot of states added an extra credit requirement to the graduation. So now many states have gone to a 3 credit requirement by the end of high school. All right, so how is the NGSS different? Reading, writing, and math are all integrated, and that's what I love about this approach, because I'm originally an elementary school teacher, so I automatically think like this. When I'm teaching, I'm always thinking, okay, what are they learning down the hall in the ELA teacher's class? What are they learning right now in the social studies teacher's class? What are they learning in math? How can I connect those things? Because as we know from brain compatible learning, students learn and remember best and are able to use the information they've learned when everything has some common connection and they see a purpose to it. So one of the basic things is that there are built-in reading, writing, and math activities. There's built-in engineering, and we really want to develop a sense of inquiry and a sense of wonder in students through these standards. All right. So next, instead of having what we term standards, we have performance expectations. That's the foundation of the NGSS. That starts with kindergarten and goes all the way up through 12th grade. There are 4 big ideas that are revisited throughout students' time in K-12. And before we were focused on, these are the standards for this grade level, and these are the standards for this grade level, and are they proficient at that grade level? But now we're focusing more on mastery over time. So it's not what did they learn in the 4th grade, it's what did they learn new in the 6th grade that built on what they learned in the 4th grade. And when they get to high school, how are they building on it then? So that you're constantly seeing a spiral back. Some of you are familiar with the term of a spiral curriculum. The NGSS does a spiral like that, and it weaves in all the subjects. So it's integrated not just by subject area, but it's integrated. The science information is integrated throughout the vertical curriculum. So it's very well vertically aligned, which is a change from what we are used to in the past. All right, so here are the 4 big ideas that fuel NGSS. We have the life sciences, We have physical sciences, we have the earth and space sciences, and we have engineering, technology, and the applications of science in the natural world. These are not different to you. We are used to teaching these subjects, but like I said, the way that we're teaching them is different, and the expectations at each grade level and how they build on each other, that's what sets it apart. The science and engineering practices that are included in the NGSS tables, that tells us what students are going to be doing in the classroom. The NGSS is very much focused on performance. What are we doing with what we know? Whereas before we were focused on what's the body of knowledge. So it takes it to the next level, and it allows students to participate more in creative and critical thinking in the classroom. All right. Then lastly, we have the cross-cutting concepts in our NGSS tables. And those are ways that you can integrate reading, writing, math, social studies, and that's also helping students to understand how they need to be thinking about science. So now that you've had an overview of the basics, I want to break down the performance expectations a little bit more. And I want to do a little disclaimer here. This came from achieve.org. The slides that I'm going to show you, they have done an excellent job of breaking things down, and I will link the video underneath my video so that if you'd like to watch their video, you can. But I just really liked the way that they presented each part of the performance expectations, so I use their information in my presentation. All right, so there are 3 parts to every performance expectation. And when I say performance expectation, that's what you would think of as a standard. Like I said, it's focused on what students should know and be able to do by the end of that lesson. You have the disciplinary core ideas, so that's your content, and that's basically where we used to stop. We used to stop with the content, but now we've added science and engineering practices. So what are the students going to do with that content? And lastly, how are we going to train them to think about science that would connect to other things that they're learning in different subject areas? Here's where we start breaking down the nitty-gritty of the standards. How is this different? What we're really teaching students to do is inquiry. We're teaching them to ask questions. And that's been a topic of education for some time now, but the new reforms in math and science have really capitalized on this idea. We want students to create their own learning. We want them to be in the driver's seat. We want them to design investigations, come to conclusions on their own, and then take what they've learned and apply it to something new that they're faced with. That's what the NGSS is going to do for us in our classroom.